Hey, I'm Jenny. In this video, I'm going to share with you how to connect with the land you reside on and how to offer a land healing ceremony to it. I have hesitated making this video because it's a touchy subject. Colonialism is real, and it has really shaped the view of land, the way people treat land, the way people live on land, how land can belong to somebody. Many of us are displaced from our ancestral lands. Many of us have mixed ancestral heritage, so it's like we wouldn't even know which land to connect with. And so I don't want to bring up any shame in anybody, and I don't want to bring up any sense of cultural appropriation. I am not of Indigenous descent in the U.S. Where I live. Most of my ancestry is in Europe and especially in Russia, and so I understand the want and the need for people to connect with land. And I understand the want of a white Westerner to adopt Indigenous beliefs or Indigenous practices as a way of connecting with the land and healing with the land. However, that can be appropriation, and that isn't exactly, where we want to go. So we have a fine balance of being a spiritual person, a spiritual seeker, and being a politically correct and a person who pays homage to the people whose land we are on, but doesn't try to appropriate that. And I have some resources here in the comments, so about land and some books that I suggest reading. But why I'm creating this is because I think, this is my personal belief, that part of spiritual awakening and spiritual journey is obviously a deep connection with Mother Earth. And I have a whole class on that. And that's something I've always felt very strongly about. Since I was a child, I have wanted to do my best to preserve and help Mother Earth. Like, I've always asked myself, what can I do for the land? Which is interesting because I've seen in Braiding Sweetgrass, that's like an idea that is new to some people. Instead of just like, what can I take from the land? What can I do for the land? So I've always tried to be a conscious consumer. I've always tried my best. It doesn't mean I'm perfect. I'm not this, perfect environmentalist. However, I do my best to honor what I consider to be our relatives, which are the plants and the trees and the animals and the crystals of the earth. And this ceremony that I want to share with you, I created because I wanted a way to send healing into the earth without offending the Indigenous spirits or the Indigenous beliefs that may reside here in the earth. So the first thing I think that is important to know is that even if you don't own your land, you can do this ceremony. So if you live somewhere in a rented space or you are traveling, even better, because you can really spread this kind of healing where you go. You need nothing. You can use crystals as part of this, but you really don't need anything. If you are a Reiki person and you have your Reiki mastery, then you can use Reiki as part of this, but you don't need it either. And so the very first principle of this ceremony is to first acknowledge through prayer that this is not your land and that it does not belong to you. That's step one. So the first thing you'll say, you'll create a sacred space for yourself, you'll cleanse yourself, you'll get in a meditative state, you'll get yourself on the land, feet planted on the land, you'll put a protective circle around yourself, take some deep breaths, and you'll say something like, "Dear Mother Earth and her relatives, my relatives, I acknowledge that I belong to the land and the land does not belong to me. So that's kind of the first step in this ceremony, because it's a shifting of the mindset of the earth belongs not to me. I belong to her. I need her to survive. I once connected with Gaia, the soul of the earth, and she said something to the effect of, I don't need you. Not just me, but like humanity. I don't need you, but you need me. And that's an important shift. So that's the first thing, is to recognize and acknowledge that the land, you belong to the land. Then the second step is to say something to the effect of, I thank and honor the shamans who've come before me, or the healers, or the priests, whatever term you're comfortable with, who have come before me and who have watched over this land and guided this land, or something to that effect. And then acknowledge the people. I acknowledge all of the people that have lived on this land. And then start to walk around, if possible, and acknowledge the individual relatives growing on that land or roaming that land. I acknowledge the birch trees. I acknowledge them as my brothers. I acknowledge the ivy as my brothers. I see the flowers as my sisters. Like, really connect with the land and make a promise in that connection that you're willing to do your best to be a part of this land, that you are going to do your best to be a part of it. And you can do something where you have maybe certain crystals that you've activated and you plant them in certain parts of the land. That's called crystal gridding. You don't need, that doesn't need to be very complicated. If you've taken my class on that, you know that it's something that's intuitive. So you'll do that if you want to. If you know Reiki, you'll give Reiki to the land. You can physically put your hands on the earth. It can be through distance. And then at the end of all of that, you know, really see yourself, maybe imagine roots coming down from the soles of your feet or your spine, depending if you're sitting or standing, and see yourself as part of this land and say, I thank and honor and send healing to this land and earth, to Mother Earth, to the relatives, the plants, the trees, the flowers, the animals, the crystals. I acknowledge and thank the elements of earth, air, fire, and water. I acknowledge and thank the ancestors who roamed this land, whether they were mine or not. Really, this ceremony is all about acknowledgement. Not taking for granted that because you're a spiritual person, the earth just already knows that you acknowledge. It's important to say. And in fact, after I've done this ceremony on the land I live on, but I also say it every day. In my morning prayers, I always acknowledge the shamans who've come before me. I acknowledge the relatives that roam this homeland and earth, I say, because I have plants and animals in the home. You can see one right there. And that's just part of being a conscious person, part of, I think, the spiritual path, and then part of feeling like you belong to the earth and connecting to the earth. A lot of Westerners look towards Indigenous people to educate us. You know, a lot of people will say, well, like, I'll get someone out here to heal the land, or I'm going to find a ceremony that was done by the people. You're not those people, and you don't have to be ashamed that you're not those people, and it's also not their responsibility to teach you. Like, we are living in this time period where we have to connect to the land and heal the land and see the land as something we belong to in order to survive as a species, right? And so this is, and it's intuitive. I'm giving, I guess this video more than anything is giving you permission to be intuitive and connect to the land, even though you may feel like, I wrote a poem in my book about it. This land was stolen. This land was, you know, stripped away of what was here. You know, I live in a very planned city, and hardly anything in my yard is native, and it's been scraped, and a lot of the things planted here are from Japan, which is beautiful, but it's not native here. And so, you know, it's a lot of acknowledgement without shame. And it's a lot of acceptance that this is how it is. And then it's acknowledgement that you're going to vow to do better. You know, it doesn't mean you're going to become an environmentalist, you know, but maybe you're going to vow to make less trash, or you're going to vow to plant some native or pollinator plants, or you're going to vow to get a bear-proof trash can to keep the bear safe. Whatever it is, and it's your steps on that. And I think that it's going to... Being a spiritual person can feel isolating at times, you know, being on this path, but once you connect to the land and the earth, you feel like you're never alone. All of the relatives around you, the plants and the trees and the animals and the birds and the, you know, the crystals. I go out and I feed the birds every morning, and I call them my friends. The rest of my family does too. Are you going out to feed your friends? Yeah. And it's like, they are my friends. And it's, you know, and they're your friends. And it's it's going to change the way you view things. You're going to feel more connected, and you're going to feel more of an obligation to live kindly. And it helps you be more conscious when you're in the world. It's not just, you know, I'm conscious during meditation, but you take that meditation outside and you study the leaves and you look at the ground, and it makes you a whole person. It helps you be a whole spiritual person. And I just want to end with a story. So part of when I was going through my spiritual awakening, I lived in the desert, the Mojave Desert. And I lived in this area that had this pretty rural, we were on a dirt road. I have a hard time with that word, or rural. And we had Joshua trees in the yard. And a lot of the yard had been scraped, but then there was parts of the yard that remained fairly wild. And I started seeing ravens all the time, which isn't like super uncommon or anything. But I felt like they were telling me something. It was a deeper connection with them. And then I started seeing, which can only be described as a shaman, it was his land. I learned it was his land that we were on. And he came to me after I did a land feeding ceremony, which I talk about in my class, Attuning to the Earth. But on August 1st, I usually make cornbread, and then each of us takes a piece of the cornbread and thanks the earth and offers it to her and puts it in the four corners of the property. And after I did that, he came to me. And he spoke the entire time he came to me, whether in person or in dreams or meditation, in his native language. So I don't know what he was saying. I get a sense of it. He did come to me one time in my dreams and showed me how to use all the plants on my property as medicine, which was so beautiful and such a deep honor. But again, I couldn't discern what he was saying. And I felt, was happy with me. He would show up in near this one juniper tree all the time, and I would leave crystals, and I would leave things to honor him there. And I felt a sense of he was happy, and he came to me because I saw the land the way he did. And this is a part where I want to say that, yeah, I'm not an Indigenous person. I'm not connected in any way to his tribe, but he chose me because I simply honored him. And that offers so much healing to not only you, but to the land and to that whole relationship of colonization and what has been done. It offers so much healing. It offers healing to ancestors. So I felt like I offered him healing, and he offered me healing in return. And it's really interesting. There was an empty lot that was totally untouched and very wild. And when they started to scrape it and build a house, I saw a raven there every day. And I could feel his displeasure. And I could feel the sadness of him losing more of his land and, more of what was his. And so I share this ceremony to honor him, because there's it's very hard for a white person to talk about these kinds of things, because it's like, well, you're not Indigenous, so you don't really know. However, I'm spiritual and I'm connected, and he came to me, and I can say that I don't have to feel ashamed or feel like I'm appropriating anything, because I'm not. It's just, this is my truth. This is what I saw. And it's same for you with your ceremony healing. Like, you offer the land healing and you connect to that land because you know what? You're there. It's through colonization, it's through displacement. Your family and your ancestors somehow got there, either by choice or by being taken or whatever. You're there now. And so you're the one that's got to heal it. I hope you like this. And if you have more questions or more ideas, more thoughts, I'd love to hear that.